Hi, this is Ryan with Zoomdata again. If you recall, last time we made a chart that we imported from Google Charts into Zoomdata. Now, we did some things well, but some things we did quick and dirty. And today I'm going to take you through another couple steps to show you a better way to do it that integrates the chart more tightly with Zoomdata. Now, I'm going to kind of touch on each of these things, but not spend too much time on them because we have a sample that you can download and look at yourself. The sample can be found here at our developer zone, www.zoomdata.com/developers, and here in the visualization framework down under the samples. Now, if you recall, when we made our chart, we just imported one from Google, and we kind of grabbed data from the returned data packets that are passed to controller.update, and we got the name of the group, and we got the current count for that group. So if our group, as in this case, like broad phase of flight, then it just grabbed the first one, which was broad phase of flight, and then it grabbed the current count for the broad phase of flight. So we've got 19,000 and some for landing, and 15,000 or some for takeoff, and so on. But there's a few problems with this approach. One is that we might want to use more than one group in our visualization. The other one is that we might want to let the user choose the metric rather. There's a few things we can do here to make this a better experience for our user, and we're going to look at those in turn. Now let's go over to the new chart where I have added these capabilities. You'll see I'm using the same data set, but a few things have happened to it. I've done three things specifically using dataAccessors, and I'll explain that in just a second. I've made it so that the group picker, Zoomdata knows which one is being used and uses that one. I've also added the ability to pick a metric so that here, for instance, it's doing a sum of one of our metrics rather than just doing a count of our elements. And I've also made it so that you can use color. Now, I'll point out the sections of code where I do each of these in their turn. The first thing to notice is that we have our group by label that we had before. That's coded right here. But I've also added another one here that codes for metric, and that allows people to select a metric. Now, for these to actually work, for these to point to anything, you have to go to add variables and manage variables, and in your variables you see I have a metric variable in addition to the group by variable I had last time. And I've made group by be the color selector, but metric is just the metric value. So that's the first thing. And now in the Zoomdata application, these metric and group pickers will be available in the visualization, and controller.createAccessLabel makes those happen and also connects them up with one of the variables. And then the user can select which of the various metrics they want to go into that variable and be used by the chart. In this case, the chart is showing percentages of a whole, so it's showing the total percentages of total fatal injuries of all the total fatal injuries. But the user can then select total uninjured and get that data. Okay, now dataAccessors are what make that possible. If you recall, in our last one, we just hard-coded and said, hey, just grab datum.current.count. The thing is, though, is that like the user might not want to look at count. They might want to look at something else. So in our new one, we've replaced that logic with a different logic. We make a variable called metric accessor, and we have a point to the data accessors in controller, which is an array of data accessors. And the one we grab is the one that matches up to the metric. The metric we identified by using controller's data accessors get metric accessor method. So we use controller.dataAccessors.getMetric accessors that returns a list of all the metrics that are currently selected. In our case, it's only one, but this makes our code be a little agnostic to that. And then we iterate through them to find which ones are actually being used now, and we identify that, and then we will refer to it from then on out. Controller.dataAccessors, whichever one is the metric, we now call that variable metric accessor. We do something very much the same with our group accessor, where we get the list of dimension accessors, they're called. In Zoomdata lingo, dimension and groups are more or less the same thing. So we get the list of dimension accessors, and then here we parse through them again, just iterate through them, and we find the one that is being used, currently selected. We also grab the datum out of it. Okay, now what we do then is we build this chart like we did in our last one, because Google, this is a requirement of the Google chart library, has its own format for how it wants its data passed to it. So we take the metric value that we got, and we take the metric value, and we take the group name, and we push them in as a new row into this table for Google. Now, you see I did a little trick here with group name. If group name comes back null, I didn't want to pass a null value, so instead I passed a string called null or unknown, and you should see that right here. It's just a little tidier for the user interface. Since these are strings anyway, I took advantage of that fact. And then we proceed as we did before in the previous visualization in part 1, the simpler version, where we pass that data array to Google's data array cooker. So I've got the data baked, and I'm calling it in a variable called Google data, because I've Googleized it, if you will. And I'm ready to pass that into Google's visualization method. But there's one thing I still want to do, and I want to make this chart responsive to colors that the user has selected. Now, the first thing you notice is our new chart has this color menu option, and the old one did not. So we make that be present for our chart by going to Manage, Controls, and select Color Palette option. Now, remember that these various controls are only available in the Zoomdata app, just like these pickers and the time bar and the key and so on. These are part of the app, not part of our chart. So we have our color picker. We've got that implemented. And now I'm going to iterate through all of the data accessors again. And this time I'm just going to look for the one that is the color accessor. And when I found the one that is the color accessor, that's the one I'm going to use. Now, the use for this is really simple. I just use the method, the color accessors get color range method. That returns an array of strings. Each string is a hexadecimal value for a color. Now, Google's chart wants its options formatted into an object like so, and once I've done that, I can create a new chart, and the new chart is using google.visualization.pie-chart, so I want a pie chart, and I give it the dimension, or I give it the DOM element where I want it to appear, just like with our simpler chart. I pass it the Google data, and I pass it the options, and it renders. This is just a brief overview on how to use data accessors to make it so that users can pick metrics and have their selection map to whatever Zoomdata is going to use for its visualization. A sturdier way, the same data accessor way, to select groups rather than hard coding it, and then also make color choices available. So thanks very much, and happy coding.